Jake Murphy lay motionless on top of the Devastator for several minutes, listening to his own breathing and waiting for the creature to move again. But the beast remained perfectly still beneath him. Its red eyes had gone dark, and he could not hear the mechanical whirring sounds that had been constant during their fight. Whatever he had damaged in its control system seemed to have shut down everything else as well. Slowly and carefully, Jake climbed down from the creature's back. His whole body ached, and he could feel blood seeping from cuts on his arms and legs. His left shoulder felt wrong when he moved it, and he was pretty sure he had cracked at least one rib. But he was alive, and the Devastator was not, which seemed impossible even to him. Jake activated his emergency beacon and then sat down heavily on a chunk of broken stone to wait for rescue. He did not have to wait long. Within an hour, he heard the sound of aircraft approaching the ruins. His beacon had worked, and somehow Pete and Amy had convinced someone to come looking for him. The first vehicle to land was a human transport flyer with Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez at the controls. She jumped out before the engines had completely shut down and ran toward Jake with a medical kit in her hands. Behind her came Sergeant Pete Collins and a team of human medics who looked shocked to see Jake sitting calmly next to the body of the galaxy's most feared weapon. "Sir, are you hurt?" Amy asked, already checking his injuries while Pete examined the Devastator to make sure it was really dead. "Nothing serious," Jake lied. "Everything hurt, and he was pretty sure he had lost more blood than was healthy, but he could still walk and talk, so it could have been worse." "How?" Pete asked, staring at the massive creature. "How did you kill this thing with just basic equipment?" Jake looked at the Devastator's body and tried to think of a simple way to explain what had happened. "I stopped thinking of it as unstoppable and started thinking of it as a machine with programming. All machines have weaknesses, if you look hard enough." More aircraft arrived over the next few minutes. The alien commanders had apparently decided that Jake's survival was worth investigating, even if they did not believe the reports about the Devastator's death. General Thys, War Chief Kron, and Commander Vex all landed together in an Altarian medical transport. The three alien leaders stood in stunned silence as they looked at the scene. The creature that their combined forces could not even scratch was lying motionless in the ruins. The human who should have been dead was sitting nearby, receiving medical treatment and acting like killing impossible monsters was just another day at work. "This cannot be real," General Thys said quietly, his big black eyes wider than usual. "My computers calculated that defeating the Devastator would require at least a full battle fleet with heavy orbital bombardment support." War Chief Kron walked around the creature's body, examining the damage Jake had caused. Kron sees the wounds, but Kron does not understand how they were made. The beast's armor should have stopped any weapon this human carried. Commander Vex was scanning the Devastator with a handheld device that beeped and flashed as it analyzed the creature's condition. "The primary control systems have been completely destroyed. Someone reached the main neural interface and manually severed the connections between the brain and motor functions. But that should have been impossible without heavy cutting tools." Jake let the medics bandage his wounds while the alien commanders tried to make sense of what they were seeing. He understood their confusion. In their cultures, every problem had a logical solution that could be calculated and predicted. The idea that sometimes the best approach was to ignore logic and do something completely crazy was foreign to them. Amy finished treating the worst of Jake's cuts and helped him stand up. "Sir, we should get you back to base for proper medical treatment and probably a very long debriefing session." "In a minute," Jake said. He walked over to where the alien commanders were still studying the Devastator's body. "General Theiss," Jake said, "I need you to send a message to the Zephyrian fleet. Tell them their perfect weapon is dead, and ask them if they want to surrender now or after we destroy their next perfect weapon." General Theiss looked at Jake with an expression that mixed respect and bewilderment. "Captain Murphy, do you really think this victory will end the war? The Zephyrians have many other weapons and ships." "Maybe not," Jake admitted. "But it will make them think twice about what humans can do when we decide we do not want to lose. Sometimes that is enough to change everything." Word of the Devastators. Defeat spread across the planet within hours. The alien forces that had been preparing to evacuate suddenly found new hope and began planning counterattacks against Zephyrian positions. More importantly, reports reached the Zephyrian fleet commanders who had thought their ultimate weapon was invincible. The psychological impact was greater than any military victory could have been. Zephyrian soldiers who had felt confident and superior began to doubt themselves. Their commanders started questioning whether their other weapons would work against humans who refused to accept defeat. Some Zephyrian units began retreating from positions they had held easily just days before. Jake spent the next 2 days in the medical bay while doctors treated his injuries and Amy handled the constant stream of visitors who wanted to meet the human who had killed the unkillable monster. Representatives from dozens of alien species came to ask how he had done it and whether other humans could do the same thing. The questions were always similar. What special training had he received? What secret weapons had he used? What tactical advantages had he discovered that their computers had missed? Jake tried to explain that there were no secrets or special advantages. He had simply refused to accept that the situation was hopeless and kept trying different approaches until one of them worked. This explanation satisfied no one except the other humans. The aliens wanted mathematical formulas and logical processes they could analyze and replicate. They could not understand that sometimes the best strategy was to have no strategy at all, just determination and willingness to try impossible things. On the third day, Jake was declared fit for duty and returned to active command. He found that the war situation had changed dramatically. The Zephyrian fleet was withdrawing from several star systems, and their ground forces were being much more cautious in their attacks. Fear of humans was spreading through their ranks like a virus. Pete and Amy briefed Jake on the latest developments, while he reviewed tactical reports in the command bunker. The same bunker where alien commanders had been planning evacuation just a few days earlier was now buzzing with offensive operations and victory planning. "Sir," Amy said, "we are getting reports that some Zephyrian units are requesting permission to surrender rather than face human forces. Their fleet commanders are apparently having discipline problems." Jake nodded, but did not smile. "Good. But we cannot let this victory make us overconfident. The Zephyrians will adapt and come up with new weapons. We need to be ready for whatever they try next." "What do you think they will try?" Pete asked. Jake looked out the window at the red sky of the alien world, where he had nearly died fighting. An impossible enemy. "I do not know. But whatever it is, we will figure out how to beat it. That is what humans do." The war was far from over, but something important had changed. The galaxy had learned that humans possessed something that could not be calculated or replicated by even the most advanced technology. When faced with impossible odds, humans did not surrender or retreat. They got stubborn and started looking for ways to turn impossible into possible. It was a lesson that would echo across the stars for generations to come. Jake reached the center of the ancient amphitheater with the Devastator only seconds behind him. His chest burned from running, and his legs felt like they were made of lead, but he could not stop now. This circular arena surrounded by crumbling stone seats would be where everything was decided. He had led the beast exactly where he wanted it, and now came the hardest part of his plan. The creature burst through the entrance behind him, smashing apart stone doorways that had stood for thousands of years. Its red eyes blazed with fury, and its claws scraped against the ancient floor as it finally cornered the annoying human who had been leading it in circles. The Devastator stood to its full 15-foot height and let out a roar that shook dust from the ruins around them. Jake stood in the exact center of the amphitheater with his rifle ready. He had already used most of his ammunition during the chase, firing shots to guide the creature where he wanted it to go. Now he had maybe 20 rounds left, and they would not be enough to seriously hurt something with armor that could stop tank shells. But bullets were not his real weapon anyway. The beast began moving toward him with the slow, confident pace of a predator that knew its prey had nowhere left to run. Jake waited until it was exactly where he needed it to be, then fired 3 shots at the creature's head. The bullets bounced off its armor without causing any damage, but they had the effect Jake wanted. The Devastator became angry and charged straight at him. Jake dove to the right just as massive claws swept through the air where he had been standing. The creature's momentum carried it forward, and it crashed into one of the ancient stone pillars, behind where Jake had been positioned. The pillar cracked but did not fall. The beast spun around, looking for Jake, but he was already moving to a new position. This was how the fight began. Jake used the Devastator's own aggression against it, making it charge at him and then dodging at the last possible moment so the creature would hit the obstacles he had chosen. Each impact damaged the ancient structures a little more and also taught Jake exactly how much force the beast could generate with each type of attack. The creature learned quickly that direct charges were not working. It began trying different approaches, using its claws to attack from unexpected angles and varying its speed to make dodging more difficult. But Jake had spent hours studying how the Devastator moved, and he recognized each attack pattern as soon as it began. When the beast tried to corner him against a wall, Jake climbed onto a pile of rubble and jumped over the creature's head. When it tried to grab him with both hands, he dropped flat and rolled between its legs. When it tried to rake him with its claws while he was trapped in a narrow passage, he used a broken metal beam to deflect the attack and guide the claws into the stone wall instead. But Jake was fighting a losing battle, and he knew it. The Devastator was not getting seriously hurt by hitting stone walls and metal debris. Its armor was too strong, and its healing abilities were already repairing the small scratches and dents it had received. Meanwhile, Jake was getting more tired, with every dodge and every climb. Soon he would be too slow to avoid those deadly claws. The turning point came when Jake noticed something important about the way the creature's armor was damaged. The small gaps he had observed earlier were getting slightly larger each time the beast scraped against rough stone. The biological components of its armor could heal from cuts and punctures, but they had trouble dealing with steady abrasion that wore away tiny pieces over time. Jake began changing his tactics. Instead of just making the Devastator hit obstacles, he started leading it through tight spaces where its armor would scrape against rough surfaces. He guided it under low overhangs that forced the creature to crawl, wearing away the armor on its back and shoulders. He led it through narrow passages where both sides scraped against the beast as it squeezed through. The strategy was working, but it was also incredibly dangerous. Getting close enough to make the creature scrape itself meant getting close enough for it to grab him if he made even a small mistake. Several times, Jake felt claws brush against his clothing as he barely escaped the beast's attacks. Once he had to use his combat knife to cut himself free when his sleeve got caught on the creature's armor. After 30 minutes of this deadly dance, Jake could see that the Devastator's armor was seriously damaged in several places. The gaps were now large enough that he might be able to reach the creature's actual skin underneath. But he still needed to find a way to cause real damage, and he was running out of energy fast. The opportunity came when the beast made a mistake that Jake had been waiting for. The Devastator had learned that direct charges usually failed, so it tried a more complex attack pattern. It feinted left, then spun right, then lunged forward with both claws extended. But the spin took longer than the creature expected because its damaged armor caught on a protruding piece of metal. For just a moment, the beast was off balance and could not change direction quickly. Jake saw his chance and took it. Instead of dodging away, he rushed toward the creature and jumped onto its back just as it was completing its spin. His hands found purchase in the gaps of damaged armor, and he held on as the Devastator began thrashing wildly. Riding the back of an enraged 15-foot monster was like trying to stay on a mechanical bull designed by someone who hated mechanical bull riders. Jake wrapped his legs around the creature's waist and held onto the armor gaps with both hands, while the beast threw itself against walls and rolled on the ground trying to dislodge him. But Jake had been planning for this moment. Throughout the entire fight, he had noticed that the largest gap in the creature's armor was at the base of its skull, where the biological and mechanical components connected to its main nervous system. If he could reach that spot and cause enough damage, he might be able to disrupt the signals that controlled the beast's motor functions. The problem was that the gap was small and protected by layers of both armor and muscle. Jake would need to literally tear through the creature's defenses with his bare hands and his combat knife. Even if he could do it, the process would leave him completely vulnerable to the beast's claws and teeth. Jake made his decision. While the Devastator was still thrashing and trying to reach him with its claws, he shifted his position and began attacking the armor gap at the base of the creature's skull. He used his knife to cut through the damaged outer layer and then began tearing at the underlying muscle and mechanical components with his hands. The beast went insane with pain and rage. It threw itself backward against stone walls trying to crush Jake. It rolled over and over trying to grind him into the ground. It reached back with its claws and nearly tore his arm off, but Jake held on and kept digging deeper into the creature's most vital systems. His hands found cables and nerve bundles that felt like a mixture of metal wire and living tissue. He began ripping them apart with his knife and his bare fingers, feeling electrical shocks run up his arms as he damaged the connections between the Devastator's brain and its body. The creature's movements became more erratic as its control systems began failing. With a final desperate effort, Jake drove his knife deep into what felt like the main control node and twisted the blade as hard as he could. Something inside the creature's skull made a sound like breaking glass mixed with tearing metal. The Devastator let out a scream that was part roar and part electronic screech, then collapsed to the ground like a building falling down. Jake lay on top of the motionless beast, breathing hard and bleeding from dozens of cuts and scrapes. He could not believe what had just happened. The creature that had destroyed entire armies was defeated, and he was somehow still alive. But he was too exhausted to feel victory yet. First, he needed to make sure the beast was really dead and not just temporarily disabled. Jake Murphy moved through the ruins of New Haven like a ghost. The destroyed city provided plenty of cover with its broken buildings and abandoned vehicles scattered everywhere. He had been tracking the Devastator for 2 hours and was finally getting close to its location. His heart beat fast, but his hand stayed steady as he crept between the shadows. The beast was feeding in what used to be the main square. 3 destroyed tanks lay around it like broken toys, and the ground was covered with debris from the battle that had happened here yesterday. Jake crouched behind a concrete wall and watched the creature through a gap in the rubble. This was his first close look at the thing that had terrorized an entire planet. The Devastator was even more impressive up close than it had looked through binoculars. Its black skin rippled with muscle beneath armor plating that seemed to grow from its body rather than being attached to it. When it moved, Jake could hear the whir of mechanical parts working together with biological systems. The creature was truly a fusion of machine and living tissue, designed by engineers who understood both technologies perfectly. But Jake was not impressed by the engineering. He was studying the way the beast moved and looking for the weaknesses he was sure existed. Every machine had flaws and every living thing had limits. The Devastator might be the perfect combination of both, but that also meant it had the weaknesses of both. The creature finished examining the destroyed tanks and began moving toward the western part of the city. Jake followed at a safe distance, using his military training to stay hidden while keeping the beast in sight. He noticed that it moved differently when it thought no enemies were around. The cautious hunting behavior was replaced by a more relaxed walking pattern that revealed things the creature tried to hide during combat. There was a slight limp in its right leg that was barely visible when it walked normally, but became more obvious when it moved fast. The armor plating on its left shoulder had small gaps. That could be seen from certain angles. Most importantly, the creature turned its head in a regular pattern while walking, scanning for threats in a predictable sequence that left brief blind spots. Jake began to form a plan. It was not a good plan, and it would probably get him killed, but it was better than no plan at all. The key was to make the Devastator think like a machine instead of like a living creature. Machines followed their programming even when their programming was wrong for the situation. The creature stopped at the edge of a deep canyon that cut through the city. This had been a river before the Zephyrians dammed it upstream and turned the area into a desert. Now it was just a rocky gorge about 50 feet deep with steep walls on both sides. Jake watched the Devastator look down into the canyon and then start walking along the edge, looking for an easy way across. This was Jake's chance. He moved quickly through the ruins until he reached a position on the opposite side of the canyon from the beast. Then he did something that would have made the alien commanders think he had completely lost his mind. He stepped out into the open, where the Devastator could see him clearly, and fired 3 shots from his rifle into the air. The creature's head snapped around toward the sound, and its glowing red eyes locked onto Jake immediately. For a moment, both human and beast stared at each other across the canyon. Jake could feel the intelligence behind those red eyes studying him and trying to understand what this small enemy thought it was doing. The Devastator let out a roar that echoed off the canyon walls and shook dust from the broken buildings. It began looking for a way to reach Jake, moving along the canyon edge with increasing frustration. The beast was used to enemies who either ran away or tried to fight it with heavy weapons. A single human standing in the open and shooting into the air was not something its programming knew how to handle efficiently. Jake began moving along his side of the canyon, staying just far enough ahead of the creature to remain out of reach, but close enough to keep its attention focused on him. This was the dangerous part of his plan. He needed the Devastator to follow him to a specific location, but he also needed to avoid getting killed if it found a way across the canyon sooner than expected. The beast tried several approaches to reach Jake. First, it looked for places where the canyon was narrow enough to jump across. When that failed, it tried climbing down one side and up the other. The rocky walls were too steep, and loose stones made climbing difficult even for something as strong as the Devastator. Growing more frustrated, the creature began throwing chunks of rock and pieces of metal across the canyon, trying to hit Jake with projectiles. Jake dodged the thrown objects while continuing to lead the beast toward his chosen destination. About a mile upstream, the canyon became much narrower and was filled with ancient ruins from whatever alien civilization had lived here before humans arrived. The ruins formed a natural amphitheater with multiple levels and plenty of debris that could be used as weapons or cover. More importantly, the ruins contained several stone pillars that were cracked and weakened by age. Jake had noticed them during his earlier reconnaissance and thought they might be useful if he could lure the Devastator into the right position. The creature was strong enough to break the pillars, but only if it hit them in exactly the right way. The Devastator finally found a place where it could cross the canyon. A landslide had created a natural bridge of rocks and debris that would support even its massive weight. Jake watched the beast carefully pick its way across the unstable surface, moving slower than usual to avoid causing another landslide that might trap it in the canyon. As soon as the creature reached his side of the canyon, Jake turned and ran toward the ruins. He was fast, but the Devastator was faster once it got moving on level ground. Jake could hear the thundering footsteps getting closer and feel the ground shaking under the beast's weight. He reached the entrance to the amphitheater just seconds before massive claws would have torn him apart. The ruins were exactly what Jake had hoped for. Multiple levels connected by crumbling stairs and broken ramps provided plenty of places to hide and maneuver. Stone blocks and metal beams lay scattered everywhere from centuries of decay and damage. Most importantly, the ancient architecture forced the Devastator to move in predictable patterns if it wanted to follow Jake through the maze of obstacles. Jake began the deadly game of cat and mouse that would determine whether his crazy plan had any chance of working. He used every piece of cover and every advantage the terrain provided, while the frustrated beast smashed through walls and columns trying to reach him. Each time the Devastator destroyed something, Jake learned more about how much force it could generate and how accurately it could control that force. The creature was incredibly strong, but its strength was not unlimited. Breaking through thick stone walls took effort and time. Smashing metal beams required multiple hits if the metal was positioned correctly. Most importantly, the beast became less careful about its own safety when it was angry and focused on destroying a specific target. Jake led the Devastator through the ruins in a careful pattern, making it break through barriers and climb over obstacles that gradually wore down its energy and damaged its armor. Small chips and scratches began appearing on the creature's skin where it had scraped against rough stone. Its breathing became slightly heavier as the chase continued, but Jake was also getting tired, and he knew he could not keep running forever. The beast was still much stronger and faster than he was. Soon he would have to stop running and start fighting, using everything he had learned about his enemy's weaknesses and behavioral patterns. The final confrontation was about to begin, and Jake was as ready as he would ever be. The command bunker buzzed with activity as alien soldiers prepared for evacuation. Jake Murphy sat in a corner with Sergeant Pete Collins and Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, studying footage of the Devastator on a portable screen. The video showed the creature destroying a convoy of armored vehicles from earlier that morning. Jake watched the same 10-second clip over and over again. "What are you looking for, Captain?" Pete asked. He was a big man with steady hands and calm eyes who had served with Jake for 3 years. Pete trusted Jake's instincts even when he did not understand them. "Something the computers missed," Jake replied, rewinding the video again. "Look at how it moves when it attacks that second truck." Amy leaned closer to the screen. She was small and quick, with dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "It hesitates for just a moment before using its right claw, like it is thinking about which weapon to use." "Exactly," Jake said. "And watch this part where it turns around." He pointed at the screen as the massive creature spun to face new targets. "See how it favors turning left over right? Every single time." General Theiss approached their group with his datapad in hand. His blue skin looked pale in the artificial light, and his tall frame cast a long shadow over the humans. "Captain Murphy, my transport ships will arrive in 2 hours. You and your people should be on the first shuttle." "Thank you, General, but we are not leaving yet," Jake said without looking up from the screen. "I do not understand. The situation is hopeless. My computers have run every possible scenario. The Devastator cannot be defeated with conventional weapons." Jake paused the video and looked up at the Altarian general. "What if we do not use conventional weapons?" General Theiss tilted his head in the way his people did when they were confused. "What other weapons do you have? Humans brought standard military equipment to this planet. Nothing special or advanced. Sometimes the best weapon is not a weapon at all," Jake said. War Chief Kron stomped over to their group with his heavy boots making the floor shake. His gray skin was scarred from many battles, and his small eyes burned with frustration. "Kron, heard you humans talking about fighting the beast. This is madness. Even Kron's strongest warriors could not scratch its hide. Your warriors tried to fight it like it was a normal enemy," Jake said, "but it is not normal. It was built for a specific purpose, which means it has specific weaknesses." Commander Vex joined the conversation while adjusting something on his green uniform. His people were known for building the best machines in the galaxy, but even they could not figure out how to stop the Devastator. "We scanned the creature with every sensor we have. Its armor is a perfect fusion of biological and mechanical components. There are no weak points." Jake stood up and walked to the main display screen showing a map of the battlefield. Red dots marked where the Devastator had attacked and destroyed enemy forces. The pattern was clear to Jake, but the aliens only saw random destruction. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing at the map. "Every attack follows the same basic pattern. The creature approaches from high ground when possible. It always targets the largest concentration of enemies first. It uses overwhelming force instead of tactical precision. This tells us something important." "What does it tell us?" General Theiss asked. "It tells us the Devastator was designed to fight armies, not individuals. Its programming is built around destroying large groups of enemies who fight back with heavy weapons. It expects certain types of resistance and responds in predictable ways." Amy looked up from her communication equipment. "Captain, I am getting reports from our scouts. The beast is moving this way and will reach our position in about 4 hours. Pete checked his rifle and made sure his gear was secure. "What are your orders, sir?" The alien commanders exchanged glances. They had learned to respect human military thinking even when they did not understand it. Humans had won battles that should have been impossible before, but this situation seemed different. The Devastator was not just another enemy soldier or even another enemy army. It was something new and terrible. "My orders are for you and Amy to prepare the emergency communication equipment," Jake said. "If something happens to me, you need to get word to any human forces still fighting on this planet." "If something happens to you," Amy repeated. "Sir, what are you planning?" Jake walked to the weapons storage area and began checking his basic combat gear. He took a standard assault rifle, extra ammunition, a combat knife, some emergency supplies, and nothing else. The aliens watched him with growing concern. "Captain Murphy," General Thiss said, "surely you are not thinking of engaging the Devastator directly? Such an action would be suicide." "Maybe," Jake said, attaching the knife to his belt. "Or maybe it would be exactly what nobody expects." War Chief Kron stepped forward with his massive arms crossed. "Kron has fought many enemies in many battles. Kron knows the difference between bravery and foolishness." "This is foolishness." "Is it?" Jake asked. "The creature has destroyed every organized force it has encountered. Tanks, aircraft, artillery, infantry formations. All of them tried to fight it the same way they would fight any other enemy. None of them tried something completely different, Commander." Vex adjusted his equipment nervously. "What could one human with basic weapons do that entire armies with advanced technology could not do?" Jake finished checking his gear and looked at the three alien commanders. These were good soldiers and smart leaders, but they thought like their computers thought. Everything had to make sense according to their calculations and analysis. They could not imagine solutions that did not fit their mathematical models. Sometimes the answer to an impossible problem is to stop trying to solve it the right way and start trying to solve it the wrong way, Jake said. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that showed they thought Jake had lost his mind. In their cultures, there was always a logical solution to every problem. Their computers could calculate the best approach to any situation. The idea of deliberately choosing an illogical course of action made no sense to them. Pete and Amy understood better. They had served with Jake long enough to know how his mind worked. He saw patterns and possibilities that others missed. More importantly, he never accepted that any situation was truly hopeless until he had tried everything he could think of. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "if you are really going to do this, you should take more equipment. Heavy weapons, explosives, maybe one of the alien energy shields." Jake shook his head. "Heavy weapons will just make me slower, and the creature expects those kinds of attacks. If I am going to try something different, it has to be completely different." An alarm started beeping and everyone looked at the main screen. A red dot was moving across the map faster than before. The Devastator had changed direction and was heading straight for their position. "It knows we are here," General Thiss said with surprise in his voice. "Somehow it detected our location." Jake studied the movement pattern on the screen. The creature was not just wandering anymore. It was hunting them specifically, which meant it had better sensors than they thought. This changed things, but it did not change his decision. "How long until it gets here?" Jake asked. Amy checked her instruments. "At its current speed, maybe 3 hours." Jake picked up his rifle and started walking toward the exit. Pete and Amy followed him while the alien commanders watched in disbelief. "Captain Murphy," General Thiss called after him, "please reconsider this course of action. Your death will not save anyone." Jake stopped at the doorway and looked back. "Maybe not, but if I do nothing, we all die anyway. At least this way, someone is trying something." He walked out into the red sunlight of the alien world, leaving behind the safety of the bunker and heading toward the most dangerous enemy any of them had ever faced. The red sun of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the battlefield as smoke rose from burning vehicles and destroyed buildings. Captain Jake Murphy crouched behind the twisted remains of a tank and watched the horizon through his binoculars. The air smelled like burned metal and death. In the distance, something massive moved between the ruins of what used to be the city of New Haven. The thing they called the Devastator stood 15 feet tall and looked like someone had mixed a Giant bear with a machine. Its black skin gleamed like metal but moved like living flesh. Sharp claws as long as swords extended from its massive hands. Its eyes glowed red in the dim light, and when it opened its mouth, rows of teeth like broken glass caught the sunlight. The creature had been built by the Zephyrian Empire to do one job, and it did that job very well. It killed everything in its path. Jake lowered his binoculars and looked at the faces around him. His unit was made up of humans and aliens working together against the Zephyrians. The Altarians looked like tall, thin people with blue skin and big brains. They were smart, but they worried too much. The Centaurians were shorter and stronger with gray skin that looked like stone. They liked to fight, but even they seemed scared now. The Andromedans had green skin and could fix any machine, but their hands shook as they worked on broken weapons. General Thys of the Altarians stood near a map table with his long fingers moving across holographic displays. His big black eyes never blinked as he studied numbers and charts. War Chief Kron of the Centaurians paced back and forth like a caged animal. His thick arms were crossed over his chest, and he made low growling sounds. Commander Vex of the Andromedans sat quietly, working on a damaged communication device, but Jake could see sweat on his green forehead. "The calculations are clear," General Thys said in his soft voice. "We cannot win this battle. The Devastator has destroyed 3 full divisions in 4 hours. Our weapons do not hurt it. Our ships cannot get close enough to help us. Logic says, we must surrender." War Chief Kron stopped pacing and slammed his fist on the table. Kron does not surrender to anyone, but Kron also does not send warriors to die for nothing. The beast is too strong. Commander Vex looked up from his work. "My people have run the numbers through our best computers. The creature's armor can stop any weapon we have. Its claws can cut through our strongest metal. It heals from wounds that would kill 10 soldiers. There is no way to defeat it." Jake listened to the alien commanders talk about surrender and defeat. He had heard this kind of talk before on other worlds and in other battles. The aliens were smart and they had amazing technology, but they always gave up too fast. When their computer said something was impossible, they believed it. When the math said they would lose, they stopped trying. The human soldiers around Jake had different looks on their faces. Sergeant Pete Collins sat cleaning his rifle even though they all knew bullets would not stop the Devastator. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez worked on her radio trying to reach any human ships that might still be fighting. Private Danny Kim studied a map of the local area like he was planning another attack. None of them talked about surrender. A loud roar echoed across the battlefield, and everyone looked toward the sound. The Devastator had found another group of vehicles to destroy. Jake watched through his binoculars as the creature grabbed a heavy truck with both hands and threw it like a toy. The truck flew through the air and crashed into a building. The beast then noticed the soldiers trying to escape and chased after them. Jake watched how the Devastator moved. It was fast, but not as fast as it could be. It was strong, but it used that strength in simple ways. It favored attacks with its left claw over its right claw. When it threw things, it always threw them the same way. When it chased people, it always took the straight path instead of cutting them off. These things meant something, but Jake was not sure what yet. "We have to evacuate," General Thys said. "My ships can take some of our people to safety before the beast reaches us." "Where will we go?" War Chief Kron asked. "The Zephyrians control most of this planet now. They will find us anywhere we hide." "Then we fight and die with honor," Commander Vex said quietly. Jake stood up and walked to the map table. The three alien commanders looked at him with expressions that mixed respect and pity. They liked humans, but they thought humans were not smart enough to understand when a situation was hopeless. "What if we do not run or surrender?" Jake asked. "General." Theiss blinked his big eyes slowly. "Captain Murphy, my computers have analyzed this situation from every possible angle. The probability of defeating the Devastator with our current resources is less than 1%. "Your computers have been wrong before," Jake said. "The numbers do not lie," General Theiss replied. "The beast was designed by the best Zephyrian scientists. They made it to destroy armies. It has never been defeated." Jake looked at the map showing where the Devastator had attacked. There was a pattern in the destruction, but the alien computers focused on the damage instead of how the damage was made. They saw the results, but not the methods. They counted the dead, but did not study how those soldiers had died. "Maybe it has never been defeated because nobody tried the right way," Jake said. War Chief Kron laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "What right way, human? Do you have secret weapons? Do you have magic powers? The beast is 15 feet tall and weighs as much as a small building. Its claws can cut through tank armor. Its skin stops energy blasts that would melt steel." Jake pointed at the map. "Look at these attack patterns. The creature always approaches from the same direction. It always uses the same kinds of attacks. It was built to fight armies that shoot at it from far away or try to run from it. What if someone did something different?" The alien commanders looked at each other and then back at Jake. They had the same expression people get when a child asks why the sky is blue. It was a mix of patience and sadness for someone who did not understand how the world really worked. "Captain Murphy," General Theiss said gently, "I understand that humans do not like to accept defeat. This is an admirable quality in many situations. But sometimes wisdom means knowing when to retreat and live to fight another day." Another roar echoed across the battlefield, closer this time. The Devastator was moving toward their position. Jake could see it in the distance, walking slowly like it had all the time in the world. It probably did. Nothing on this planet could hurt it, so why should it hurry? The alien soldiers began preparing to evacuate. They packed up equipment and prepared their few remaining vehicles. Some of them looked relieved that the fighting would end soon. Others looked ashamed that they were running away. All of them looked at the human soldiers like they were crazy for not being more afraid. Jake watched the Devastator get closer and made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself.